Asteroid of fear.
Welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And today I'm going to be talking with Michael Ostrolenk. And we're going to be talking about some resilience and getting out of your comfort zone, doing hard things and all that, and which I love and try to do intentionally because that way, when life throws you those curveballs, then you're kind of ready because you've already, inoculated yourself a little bit. And so, yeah, life has been hard for me lately, and um, so I'm excited to have this conversation because who can't use a little bit of resilience? And I think especially if you're married with kids and have a job and all kinds of different responsibilities these days, and man, you turn on the news and the world is just crazy right now with the strikes going on at the shipping ports and man, but how are you doing today?
Man, no complaints. It's a beautiful day here in Austin, Texas, where I'm residing for this a little bit of time.
Yeah,
Um, I, yeah,
you were telling me you were a nomad. Where were you before Austin? And kind of give the audience
yeah,
a few idea of some of the places you've been, so we can kind of pull this experience together with the backstory and
yeah, sure.
understand this.
So I spent about a month in Ecuador prior to
Hmm.
my time here in Austin, and it was an interesting time to be in Ecuador. And I'll share in a moment, but I was there for a few reasons. One, because I was training up to do a 50-mile go, which I did in May in Washington
Hmm.
D.C., and I was like, man, it'd be great to be in the mountains and the beaches of Ecuador. It's gonna be hot as F. It was like
Hmm.
98, 100 degrees and humid. I'm like, that's gonna be a great place to train. So I literally trained 2 4 hours a day, just rucking. Beautiful environment. Ecuador has amazing food and beautiful people. And it's like, yes, it is a great place. However, it was interesting because, like, I don't know if you track what happened in Ecuador back in late January, early February, but at the time there were about 22 narco terrorist gangs that kind of control parts of Ecuador.
Hmm.
And one of them, in the uprising, took over their version of CNN, went to university and started killing college students, went after some politicians, literally 48 hours upon my arrival. And the president literally declared war against these 22 different narco gangs. The military came on the street, whole country was shut down. It's like, hey, welcome to Ecuador. So that was like my entry into Ecuador. It was really like, whoa, okay, this is going to be an adventure.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of people would
And
pack up and
a
turn around.
lot of people, what?
I said a lot of people would probably just take that cue, pack up and go the opposite way. So it's kind of impressive that you're like, you knew what you were there for, and you're like, well, I'm gonna roll with it.
Well, so for the first week, you couldn't actually leave. The whole airport was
Mhm.
shut down.
Oh,
After that, I could have left if I wanted to. So like, and I chose not because I'm there. I'm here to train. It's all good. But I think a saving grace for me is when I train, I wear a weight vest. At the time, really good shape, short hair. So like, I'd be rocking the beaches and the mountains. And I was told like, you got to be really careful because this war is going on. Dot dot dot. I'm like, okay, I'll be really careful. On Saturdays, there's an expat party. So like, Americans, Canadians, and Ecuadorians get together and just hang out for like a few hours, drinking, eating, and stuff like that. So I got invited to these parties. And someone said, hey, are you the guy on the beach rocking? Because someone saw me on the beach. And someone else said, oh,
hmm.
yeah, you're the guy on the beach. I'm like, yeah. I'm the guy on the beach. They're like, hey, are you U.S. military? Are you here to train up the Ecuadorian military for the war against these narco terrorists? I'm like, no, but that's really interesting. I wonder if I was not fucked with
Right.
because local Ecuadorians thought I was military, and that's like the last thing they want to mess with, because then
Yeah.
we would do something about that. So I'm like, oh, that's a saving grace, which is kind
Yes.
of fun.
How
Yeah.
did you get into rucking? I mean, you said 50 miles you did in DC?
Yeah. So I created called Team Food Issue, which I'll get into a moment, but your
Hmm.
question is how I got into rucking. So in 2009, I did what's called the 3 week SOF Academy and Kokoro camp at SealFit. I don't know if you're familiar with SealFit.
I've heard of it.
Okay, so
I
I'll
was in
do a
the
quick
Navy.
background. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's founded by retired Navy SEAL Commander Mark Devine. He
Hmm.
had a training program for young men who wanted to go Navy Special Warfare, wanted to become SEALs. I was 39. I wasn't going anywhere, but I'm like, hey, that sounds really cool. I want to do this
Yeah.
program. So I literally moved to San Diego for a month, did that program. We trained 12, 14 hours a day, amazing cadre of troops. I had a SEAL, Dan Cirillo, God rest his soul. He died last year, 2 years ago by now.
Yes, Taco.
Talk, you
Taco.
know, talk. Oh,
I don't know him, but um Sean Ryan show, Mic Drop, Cleared Hot, some of my favorite podcasts. I'm very familiar with
oh,
all the
nice.
people within the group and follow, because truth be told, I would have loved to have been naval special warfare when I went in the Navy, but that was not my path.
Mhm.
But very much so as a young child growing up on 12 acres, playing commando, in
Yep,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
late 80s, early 90s, wearing an
yep. I
Alice
hear you.
pack, all
Yep,
that stuff. Um, very, very near and dear to me. And, I love veterans, the sacrifices that they've made. I definitely get it because I was in the Navy in the mid 90s, so nothing was going on during the Clinton years. And yeah, so I'm very familiar with all the names you've mentioned.
man. I think it's like, yeah. So Dan, man, God rest his soul. He trained me up prior to the 3 weeks off academy.
Uh-huh.
Kokoro camp is 50 hours based on Hell Week. It's five instead of 5 days, it's 50 hours. And then he was one of the SEAL cadres during this whole process, and I can tell you about him. But eventually, we became friends and actually ended up working for him.
Okay.
So that was really cool. But I did the 3 weeks off academy, did Kokoro camp. I loved it. Like I love training, hanging out with these amazing elite athletes,
Yeah.
soft guys and stuff like that. And then Mark Devine invited me back. So to answer your question, rocking was a huge part of all that.
Yeah.
And then Mark invited me back to help him launch the Invaluable Mind Academy, to run his inner circle, which is a mastermind group, organize the summits, which he used to do, and to help launch, run, co-lead, and then run his coach and training program. So rucking is a part of all of that stuff too. So I've been rucking since 2009.
2009. So what did you do before that? And did, so like myself, I graduated high school a year early, joined the Navy at 17.
Okay,
And, my path has been a lot of places, but always kind of centered in service, whether it was
nice.
the military. I worked at a mixed martial arts training facility. I've
Oh,
done
cool. Okay,
there in Austin, and I've done I worked in the hospitals, of course, and yeah, I did cooking for a long time, which is a form of service and
oh
very
yeah,
much kind of
yeah.
like the military because it's very designed around teamwork. It's a very fast-paced environment. The language and the attitudes are super similar in terms of, like something needs to get done. It just needs to get done now. There is no please and thank you. And, but it's these situations that you begin to understand that, a kick in the balls is always going to hurt. There's no way to prepare for it. But if you have good people around you and you come out the other end victorious, it certainly makes that kick in the balls kind of worth it because you feel like you accomplished something. So kind of where
100%.
did your journey start, like as a young man?
Yeah, so I'm actually licensed as a marriage and family therapist at the state of California. Yeah, my graduate work was in transpersonal psychology. I did
Hmm.
postgraduate work in somatic or health or body psychology, so integrating spirit and the body into the work. And then all the usual family relations and family systems and therapy and all that stuff integrates into my work together. So like I've been a therapist for almost 30 years, coaching for about 25 of those 30 years, because at one point I'm like, I don't want to do insurance. I had a conflict with an insurance company, not wanting to provide information to them.
I ran 2 clinics before I got laid off 9 months into the pandemic. So, and I never went back. I said, I'm just going to do my own thing and do a podcast. So I get the insurance and the desire, especially probably as an independent, not to participate in a system that is broken and not for the people, but for the
100%,
pockets of
100%.
those other people.
Yeah, 100%. Because I remember in conflict with the insurance company, my notes on this particular client. And I'm like, I'm not going to give that to you because I know you're going to use it against this person. And I just, out of ethical like place. I'm like, I can't do this.
What's right is
Beginner,
right, and doing the right thing never goes out of
yeah,
style. And I used to always tell my team that I
yeah,
go, you do what's right and do what's best for the patient. If my director, the VP, CEO, I don't care who has anything to say about it, even if you lose a couple of bucks, the right thing is the right thing for the patient,
all right.
especially when
So
you're
you,
taking care of
yeah,
people.
you and I will be friends because yeah, 100%. And after that, I'm like, I'm not going to do insurance. Like I don't want to have to put up with that shit, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been, coaching 25 years or so. 10 of that SEAL Fit Unbeatable Mind Academy. I work for Taco, Dan Cirillo.
Mm-hmm.
Other institutions I work for, kind of in the human optimization, anti-fragility, resilience space. I work with individuals. I have a whole human comprehensive development program, couples. I co-lead a men's group with JC Glick. He's a former Army Ranger. He now runs a Commit Foundation. In the new year, I'm cheating on my SEAL friends, and I'm partnering with a Army Special Forces guy, and we're launching a tactical men's fitness group.
Yeah.
Like close quarters combat, hand-to-hand combat, survival training, leadership stuff, team building, individual development work. So, all of that stuff. And then parallel with all the coaching therapy work that I did, I had two other. One was a full-time job, the other was a semi part-time job
Mm-hmm.
because I I get involved in new things and I never leave old things. So I just keep expanding. So
Right.
I also spent about 20 years doing public policy work, a lot of it in the national security space, DoD reform, foreign policy, cybersecurity, things along those lines for about 20 years, counterterrorism stuff, dot, dot, dot. So like coaching, therapy, national security policy, a lot of that. And I'm also trained as a PPS, person protection specialist, and I
Mm-hmm.
did a little bit of that work too, and a good bit of tactical training. So those are kind of like three streams of my life.
How does a therapist um gain interest in this parallel life?
So in my household as a kid growing up,
Uh-huh.
me and my father debated two things over dinner: nutrition and policy.
Okay.
Yeah, as a little kid, like I was always interested in like human optimization and health and alternative growth philosophies and Eastern philosophy and the martial arts. 40 years in the martial arts. We can talk
I
about that
got
too.
hey, at 8 years old, I think I started Taekwondo or nine.
Oh,
Got my black belt at 12,
oh my
and
God.
I
Okay.
was always interested in the brain. I can remember as a probably somewhere in those years I had it back then it was called the Big Book of the Brain.
Cool.
And because there was this idea of what we use very little of what we're capable of using. And
Yeah.
growing
Yeah. Yeah.
up as a small kid, asthmatic as a kid,
Yeah.
to put it into perspective, I was 90 pounds and 4'11" as a freshman. And my dad was a small guy, and he was a Golden Glove champ and an Army boxer, won
Wow.
85 and lost
Wow.
11. But he's like, you're going to be small like me. And if you're going to be small, you're going to have to be a little bit meaner than everyone else because people
Okay.
are going to test you. And so I got into martial arts, and with the martial arts kind of comes some of the Eastern philosophy, the mindset,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
integrity, spirit, stuff like that.
Bushido.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
then so you kind of combine some of these things and growing up in the sticks and my dad having been in the army and what kid doesn't want to be a commando and jump out of planes and
All right.
fight for, I think I'm a Gen X, I'm 48.
All right.
And there's definitely this. I was just talking to a 97-year-old vet who
Wow.
we care for, kind of doing home health.
Nice.
And he went to the Naval Academy. He was a naval architect. And I told him I was interviewing somebody who was in kind of this space, and he was kind of super excited. But yeah, there's just I think there was a different level of patriotism from
100%.
these
Yeah.
generations,
Yeah.
and it's never more evident. And I don't think I'm stepping out of line when I say if you look at recruiting numbers now,
Oh
that
my God.
um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, not only are recruiting numbers really low, the options for recruiters to recruit people are diminishing because people, obesity,
yes,
psychiatric medications from ADD to depression, anxiety, like there's a lot of physical and psychiatric troubles in our youth, which makes recruiting them that much more difficult, let alone the numbers of people who might want to join anyways. But let me,
yeah,
so I love you. So you said You were 12. No, no,
Mm-hmm.
no, no, no. You're 8 when you started Taekwondo and
Mm-hmm.
12 when you got your black belt.
Like up. Mm-hmm.
I was 9 and got mine when I was 13, I think. So
Oh
very
my gosh.
similar. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And, long history of the martial arts from Japanese jiu-jitsu to Krav Maga,
Hmm.
Hagana, all these things. But I'm always attracted more Shaolin Kempo toward the Eastern philosophy.
Yeah,
Although I find like Krav Maga and Hagen are probably best for reality-based fighting from my
right.
experience. But like, yeah, I love the Bushido code. I literally have it in my bathroom on the wall. So every time I'm doing my business, I look at it, I think about it.
Yeah, you get some
Yeah,
fundamentals, like people like, now with UFC, jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and all these things, like it's so different, but like in the 80s and stuff, that these were kind of the options, but you still get like these great fundamentals of kicking, striking, and competing in tournaments. I won first in regionals, second grand
nice,
nationals, second regionals. But I can
nice.
remember when I went to Thailand in the Navy, I was stationed in Japan, and we had somebody go on beach detachment before, and they were like, "Hey, let's meet at this bar, best friends bar." And in the center is a ring and Muay Thai matches all day. And this is the mid 90s. And I sat there at the bar 14 hours straight watching Muay Thai matches. I was just so,
That's
because
awesome, man.
MMA wasn't a huge, you'd had a few things by then, like UFC was kind of starting off,
Mhm.
but to go from like a small town in Texas where only like Taekwondo and a few things are offered to being in Thailand and seeing Muay Thai, I was like
That's pretty
just
badass. Yeah,
focused, and that's how I
yeah.
could sit there and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is the best.
I love that. That's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But
like, your question was like my background. So, there's kind of
yeah,
three streams of activity over the past 30 some years. Yeah.
yeah. And so you when you're a young man and you're deciding this, did you consider the military? Did you know college? Did you know social work, or I mean, or counseling, or were you like, I'm going to get some basics? Kind of what was that thought process going in, because you had these different interests?
So, I was 17 is a Friday, and I visited a Marine recruiter.
Okay.
And he's like, "Hey, you're too young. You need to have your father sign." I
Yeah.
said, "Okay." So I'll come back Monday with my father. He can sign. So I came back on Monday, and the beginning of the story is you're going to like, this makes no effing sense. Like, okay,
Right.
so I show up on Monday with my father, and the recruiter, same dude from Friday, he's like, I've been thinking about it, and I think you should go to college first. And you're like, what? Like a recruiter saying that? I'm like, okay, well, you're the recruiter, you might know. He said, yeah, go to college first, and then come back and see whoever's here that we can come in as an officer. I'm like, all right, that makes sense. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, cool. All right, so I didn't know this. I didn't find this until 10 years later. But so I talked to him on Friday. My father visited him on Saturday.
Ah, that sounds like my father. So, the only way I got my parents to sign for me
Yeah, how's that?
was if I agreed to go into the Navy nuclear engineering program. So I
Okay,
did,
okay,
and because my dad really wanted me to go to college, and
okay.
I didn't really want to. And my mom, because I graduated a year early because of that reason, I was like, I just want to go do my thing, my passion. But my mom's like, well, when you get there, change your job. You're already in. We already signed for you. Well, they don't let you do that. When you're in the Navy and you're committed to a 6-year thing and going to be a nuclear engineer, they won't do it. And I, I was like, fine, then I'll play the game. And I went all the way through my A school. I needed a three, no, maybe a 2.5 to pass the final. I made a 2.47. They stuck me in a room for a week with two other people and said, you're going to study for a week, come back and take the test. I said, well, if I pass this school, then I'm on to the next school and I'm never going to get out of this pipeline. So I made a 197 so I could get reclassified. And I was like, okay, this is my opportunity. And I kind of wanted to be a corpsman because I was like, well, as a corpsman, you could go SEALs, you could go Force Recon, and worst case scenario, you could be a field corpsman with the grunts, with the
Okay.
infantry. And
Right, right, right.
well, and I get to reclassification, and they're like, okay, no, like the only thing like another friend who had the same thing, he had all these jobs available, and I had a blacklist with only like admin and supply, and they wouldn't let me go anything else because they were like, well, you fell out of that, so we're not giving you any opportunities. And so I ended up being a yeoman. I graduated second in my class, got accelerated advanced promotion because
Cool.
it was a breeze. But, that was kind of ah, man, very, very, very similar, in that. But if I could have avoided that, I think if, and it took so long. And the funny thing was, is I was in Japan and I got a full ROTC scholarship to come back to the States
Nice,
and
nice.
attend school. And I remember not wanting to take it and talking to my father via payphone over calling card in
Gosh.
Japan. And he's like, well, we worked too hard for this. I'm like, what do you mean we? Because he wanted me to go to college.
Hmm.
And I had my 19th birthday in Japan. I was still, as an only child, people pleaser. I couldn't say no to my dad. And I came back, did a year in ROTC, and then it was during the Clinton time, and I dropped it after a year because I just didn't want to do it. And they weren't hurting for people, they were letting people out. And so that was the extent of my military career. And I can remember my E6 telling me, he's like, I really don't think you should take this scholarship. He goes, you don't want to be an officer. He's like, and at that time I'd been in 18 months, a little more. And he's like, if you take this program, he goes, your officer career will be the same length as the time you've been in the Navy now. And he was right because I ended up
Mm.
dropping it because that was not me and it wasn't what I wanted to do. And, I hope this resonates with if there's any fathers or young men listening,
Mm.
is that there's always going to be this point in life that you have to try to be your own man and you're going to have
Yep,
to tell your
yep.
parents, your father, no,
Hmm.
this is not for me. This is not what I want to do. But then also, if you're a parent, a father, I would say nurture whatever your child's desire is and support them because I was always of this thing. Okay, if I was smart enough to get into the nuclear engineering program, then I'm smart enough, but just because one could be a doctor or could be a lawyer doesn't mean one should be a lawyer or
Right on.
should be a doctor. And so I would just, as we talk about mindset, resilience, and some of these things, I think that's kind of an important note.
100% agree. And if you don't mind me stacking on
Yeah,
either
go
the
for it.
father to the son or the son to the father, two thoughts across my mind, for one for each, is like when I had a course correction, I was actually in the MBA program. A friend of mine was murdered, had a great night of the soul. A month later, a teacher's committed suicide. Just a really hard emotional time for me. I'm like, what do I really want to do? I don't want to do this path. What I really want to do is what I was interested in as a kid in the psychology,
Hmm.
alternative philosophy, optimization stuff. And that's when I ended up going to grad school. My father, always supportive of me, but he um, very concerned about my school choices, that it wasn't APA approved and it's going to limit me down the road. And very conventionally thinking down the road, like
Yeah,
what this would mean for me. And for a while, I took that as like he doesn't support me, as
right,
opposed to like he has his views, and maybe they're limited compared to me. Cool, but he actually does care and support me,
right.
and like this is his way of making sure I'm making a good decision.
Yeah,
So, like for the son, be open to that your father is doing his best to guide you from whatever he knows about life. You know,
yeah. At
the one thing.
48, my dad's 70. I just had breakfast with him this morning.
Oh, nice.
Um, we see each other all the time, but I understand it now, but everything had to happen to lead both of us here face to face, doing what we're doing now, what we're passionate about. And I think, because I'm in the process of really honing in my niche into finding my place in the podcast world and what I want to offer alongside the podcast, and that is men's coaching, helping men get through difficult situations like I have the past 2 years. And that's all a part of it. And I don't think had all these things not happen the way they did, kind of divinely, um, I wouldn't have the tools, the mindset, the experience, the heart, the grace, and understanding
Nice,
to
nice, nice.
do the work I intend to do.
Well, I'll say what you just said, and you actually, when you open this conversation, the way you described the importance of putting yourself in tough situations so you can build your resilience because life is going to throw things at you anyways. I think you're like the epitome of what I attempt to do in my work with men, mostly, if individuals, and then the men's group is like teach them that approach to life, which you just nailed. Like, damn, I just quote that. That's kind of perfect. Because life does throw hard things at us, no matter what, for the most part.
Yeah.
And it's like, how are we capable of handling it? Do we show up? Marcus Anderson, he wrote a book on adversity. He's a friend, and like I took this from him, like smile at adversity. Yeah, life is fucking hard sometimes.
Yeah.
And if you approach it from this like negative, oh my God, I'm the victim of this thing, whatever it is, and you might be a victim of a person or a situation, but if you
Hmm.
actually operate from that mindset, it can and will crush you. If you take this like, hey, here's a life lesson, there's things I can learn here. I'm going to learn about my strengths. Cool. I'm going to learn about my weaknesses, things I can develop over time. That's awesome too. I'm a victor. I'm not the victim. Like, and I can smile at this adversity. And maybe you cried during the adversity fucking too. Cool. I
Yeah.
get
Oh,
that.
yeah.
But like, it's a body mindset that you approach life at. And I think that's so, so important.
I slept 3.5 hours last night, and I have my own private accountability group, and I put in there, hey, I wish I'd slept more than 3.5 hours, but this is the way it is. I got a busy day. Maybe it's giving me a jump start on my day, but I'm gonna crush it. Who cares? You know,
Nice.
it is what it is. Insomnia is my
Yeah.
superpower.
Well, as I have a four-pillar program, and the first pillar is physiological, and sleep is an important part of it. So if I was
Hmm.
working with you, I might have a conversation offline, like
Yeah.
we should talk
I,
about your
well,
sleep.
I'm trying to actually work on that. I had two 24-hour days last week, but
Wow,
part of it was um, in this transformation over the past couple of years, I've lost 49 pounds. I've gone from nine
wow, good for you.
prescriptions to two and
Wow,
got off
good job.
sleeping medication and all kinds of stuff. And for a
Holy
little
moly.
bit, I was actually using like some Delta 8 edibles
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot, and that was very helpful. Cannabis, whatever you want to call it, was super helpful in helping me get off. Like I was on an antidepressant that wasn't doing me any good. I was on a muscle relaxer. I was on sleeping pills, blood pressure medication. Now the only thing I take is I was taking two blood pressure medications. Now I just take one, and then I take an
Wow.
allergy medication. And I'm hoping in another 15 pounds I'll be off the one blood pressure medication. But in terms of um, actually the 24th of September, just the edibles were no longer serving me. They weren't doing what I wanted them to do. I'm having more responsibilities with podcasting and stuff and just catching a lot of forward momentum. And I was just like, it's it's just not working. So I knew that I was going to have a little rebound
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
not get some sleep for probably a week and a half or so. And my Whoop proved it to me with I got 28 hours total for last week. But it's evening out a little bit, but I do like I understand the importance of sleep, and that's why I have the Whoop because I know I need it, and
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
want to
yeah.
track it, and we track things that are important to us, and you could make an argument how accurate is it? It doesn't
Makes
matter.
sense.
It definitely gives you a baseline, and it
Mm-hmm.
gives you something to look at, and you can tell how you're feeling, and you can look at the strain, and you can look at your recovery and your sleep, but I definitely, part of stopping the edibles for sleep is to gain more baseline balance, natural balance, because I don't want to take anything. I mean, in today's crazy ass world, like, people who have trouble getting their medication shortages, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't need it, then you ain't got to worry about it.
So, congratulations, first of all, on the weight loss. That is
Thank you.
awesome. Knocking off most of your medications. Really well done.
Yeah,
You don't need them
been
anymore.
tough. I've been
Yeah.
sitting. You have to sit through a lot of pain, and especially if you come off antidepressants, which gave me just a huge flat affect. I could catch
Mhm.
glimpses of happiness, but when when you don't, sounds shitty to say, but when you don't feel the deepest love and connection for maybe your wife, your children, and stuff, um, yeah, not good. Flat affect. And so when I came off, I cried a lot, but at least I knew I was feeling. And if I could get through that, it would even out. And it did. And I am so thankful because, my wife and my daughter, being able to feel that,
Yeah, yeah.
that visceral feeling of love and compassion that I know I have within me that makes makes me a server, makes me a caregiver, a caretaker. It's back, and
Good,
I'm
good.
never more thankful. But
Well, I'm happy for you, your daughter, and your wife too. That's wonderful, man.
yeah, so you go into practice, you start
Oh yeah, yeah.
practicing. Do you practice for yourself or do you practice with a group, or how does that kind of journey start? And then where does the interest in kind of these challenging yourself,
Okay, yeah,
that led into soft
yeah.
stuff get to?
Yeah, so I've been really fortunate to both have a private practice and then work for a wide variety of institutions.
Hmm.
So, like, I worked for SealFit for a decade. I worked for Taco Dancerillo for 4 years. I ran his coaching program. I worked for here in Austin, Texas, Peron Zoe. I
Hmm.
taught in their Epigenetics Academy, precision-based medical clinic. I work with their clients, co-leather mastermind group, and what else did I do for them? Something else I did for them too. But like I had institutions that would hire me to come in
Okay.
and coach within their system, and then also my own stuff that I do as well. So I've been really fortunate. Like I just know really great people, and I was going to actually recommend Dr. Kirk Parsley.
Hmm.
He's a retired
Doc
SEAL.
Parsley. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, because he might be a great guest on the sleep stuff.
Yes.
His expertise is sleep. I'm more than
And he
happy to
has
make
like a
him.
formula you can buy
He
on
does. He
Amazon, I'm pretty
does.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you ever want to talk to him, let me know. Hook you guys
Yeah.
up. But like the precision based medical clinic here in Austin, Micro Hamilton, Dr. Hamilton, and Dr. Stickler, she discovered me on LinkedIn, saw
Okay.
that Kirk and I were friends, reached out to Kirk, said, "Hey, Kirk, what do you think of this Michael guy?" Kirk said really good things about me. He and I spoke together at SealFit back in the day. And so Micro called me up, and the next thing I know, I'm like all in their ecosystem working for many different things. And that's kind of epitomizes like my path over the last 30 years. I get
Wow.
really connected to some great people doing really cool stuff. I work within their system. I do my own stuff, and I keep working for different really great people.
And so you knew that mindset kind of piece. Now, when you were kind of doing the traditional like counseling therapy type stuff, we all know that it has to do with the mind, but did you approach it like from a mindset point of view that your mindset is what's equal to you getting better or is what's gonna propel you forward out of whatever issue you may be dealing with, why they're there in front of you in the first place?
So I can't help doing what I'm about to say because my mind always goes systemically. So yeah, like mindset's really important. What happens between our ears, like how we think about things, what language we use, the
Right.
tone, the volume, internal as well as external conversations. But someone who's trained in somatic or body psychology, the whole body is important to me. Breathing patterns, posture, muscle tone, things like that, because all that is an expression of one's psychology. So I don't limit to like how we think about stuff, but also how the body expresses how we think about things too, and how we think about things is also an expression of the body. So like, how do you optimize the physical body, open the system up so you can be more effective, productive, healthier, happier, those kind of things. But then I have to contextualize it in relationships, like we're not islands. Like we're interconnected with other human beings, whether it's our family or our spouse, our kids, our parents, people we work with, our friends. All of those play important roles too. So I look at all that stuff too, plus the environment. Like, oh, what's the environment we live in? You
Okay.
living in rural Texas, I would imagine is a different experience for you than living in Austin, Texas, or
Absolutely.
Okinawa. Were you in Okinawa in Japan? Is that where you're
I was
stationed?
actually in Atsugi at the air base and we would
Okay,
deploy to Yokosuka.
okay, so that whole part of the world is different than Austin, Texas, than
Oh
different for
yeah.
rural Texas. So environments play an important role in psychology and physiology too. Diet, nutrition, sleep. I mean, I can't help but like thinking all these things. And when I first started as a therapist, all that stuff as like more and more I learned, I started thinking broader and broader and broader and broader and
Mm-hmm.
broader. So an individual might come in with a particular issue, like I want to work on this thing. And I always think like, okay, that's the vehicle in to develop the capacities, the inner resources necessary to, yeah, let's deal with that. But like, let's help you deal with everything,
Yeah.
not just that issue. That's always my mind goes there. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like when having the similar backgrounds of martial arts and whatnot, um, there's that kind of physical fitness component, but
Mhm.
also it is very, interestingly enough, I think about it too, because where I grew up, when we first moved here, I think it was like 400 and something people, then it was like 600, 800. Now it's like 3,500,
Wow, that's a big difference.
but very Baptist. And I'm not
Mhm.
throwing shade at religion, but
Yeah.
it's different conceptually when you grow up kind of interested in martial arts, Eastern philosophy, Buddhism, and they don't separate kind of the spiritual aspect of what I call kind of alignment with the physical part of it.
Yeah.
Where I think religion kind of focuses more on something that's more cerebral and mental, even though I think if you're tuned in and you believe in a God or a universe, it it kind of is a feeling. But as a young boy growing up in kind of a duplicitous environment,
Mm.
you know, it it was definitely more challenging. It was a little outside of the box to consider bringing it all together versus thinking of these things as totally separate,
Separate.
you know?
100%. Yeah, that's also kind of my experience too. What's interesting though, transpersonal psychology was my graduate focus. So we studied religious systems and spiritual practices within the
Hmm.
different religious systems like prayer, meditation, yoga, psychedelics,
Yeah.
sensory deprivation. There's certain pain techniques certain Native American tribes use, et cetera, to alter consciousness, non-ordinary
Hmm.
states of consciousness. But what's interesting is like you think about it, yeah, like for many, Christianity is a very cerebral thing. Not for everyone, but
Yes.
for many, as an example. But if you actually listen to what God says through the Bible, if that's your belief system, the body's thy temple.
Right.
So if you really took that seriously, you have to think about what you eat, what you consume, like
Hmm.
what you not only what you eat and drink, but literally what you consume through the
How you
eyes,
talk
what
to
you listen
yourself.
to, all of that stuff. Yeah, it's like oh, so like you could actually go from cerebral to whole systems
Would you go
to
into the
any.
church and cuss at Jesus on the cross?
Yeah,
No. And if
and
you're an embodiment of Christ kind of type of thing, that's what you're trying to live and be like, why? I still suffer with it, but you know, just thinking about it, as you
yeah.
said that, that's what I thought of.
Yeah, yeah, no, because in the Christian tradition or the monotheistic Judaism, Islam, Christianity tradition, we're creating God's image. God
Right.
doesn't make mistakes. Like, so if you cuss yourself out, you're cussing God's great work. Wow, take that seriously.
Yeah.
Pretty powerful.
Did what did your what kind of results and successes did you have with, let's say, patients, and what did they think, like if I come to you and I'm like, hey, I'm having this problem, I want to talk about it, and then you bring in a more holistic approach and you're like, well, how is this? How's your sleep? How's your nutrition? Do you exercise? What do people think of that when you initially kind of introduce that? And then what kind of results did you get afterwards?
So you'll appreciate this and this is counterintuitive. So when I interview a client to see if it's a good fit, like, am I
Right?
fit for you? Are you fit for me? I actually try to convince them not to work with me.
Yeah.
Because they'll be like, "Oh, I'm very interested." I say, "All right, cool. Think about it for 48 hours. I don't want you to do it because you're excited because we had a great conversation. I want you to
Right.
do it because you're willing to do the work that I just
Yes.
walked through. That's going to be required to do my program because there's a lot of work. Because we're going to be tracking and working on physiological, psychological, social, and environmental factors. Like it's a lot of good work.
Hmm.
All right, so they come in knowing that they're going to do a lot of work, and my couples are the same. Like, hey, this isn't just you talk to me every couple of weeks and we just talk
Right.
for an hour. Like, you're going to have homework to do. because I am helping you change how you show up for yourself and your partner. And it took 20, 30, 40 years for you to learn how to show up as you're presently showing up, and it's not as effective for you as you'd like. It's going to take work to undo those bad patterns and
Yeah.
replace it with something more effective and efficient for the ends that you seek in terms of intimacy, love, and connection. All right. With all that said, so people know they're coming in to do work. The results I get are really cool, because what I have people do is, for the individual work, we create an integrated training plan. Like, here's what's going to guide us for at least 6 months of our work. And then they journal every day to kind of see how they're living out. Is there an alignment? Use the word alignment. Like, I claim to be wanting to do this. This is the kind of life I'm creating. Let's see how you're doing with your journal. And then we have conversations too. And okay, then we have, this is important. Like, okay,
Yes.
you're doing the work. You're heading in the direction you want. You're creating your future self presently. Cool. And in the journaling, they start tracking variables. And it's amazing to watch people wake up going, oh my God, I didn't realize that I drank that night, and for the next 48 hours, like, my food intake changed, my sleep was messed up, my cognition was distorted, energy levels weren't so good, or whatever variable, like whatever they did, they start seeing its relationship to other parts of their lives. And I always say, you're an adult, make the decisions you want to, but at least you're informed. Like, if you decide to drink, as an example, it's going to have for you these consequences over the next 24, 48 hours. Okay, be aware of that. And then you have to deal with those consequences. And a lot of people are like, oh man, I literally don't see the benefit of drinking now. Like,
Right.
I can work on my social skills so I can show up and have fun without drinking. And I don't have the consequences for the next 24 to 48 hours, as an example, from drinking heavily or even lightly. Cool. Same thing with food and sleep, how they deal with stress. All that they start just noticing, and they start shifting their lives. A client did a Whole30, where they remove a lot of stuff from their diet. And I love the compare and contrast. I have a lot of clients do compare and contrast and baseline testing. I can get into in a moment, but the compare and contrast is important. They do the Whole30, their brain fog goes away, their digestive problems go away, their arthritis goes away, or whatever their stuff is. And they're like, I had no idea that was a problem, because that was my norm. Like, I always walk around with brain fog or upset stomach or a little arthritis in my shoulder or my arm, whatever. Now I can see that's not my norm. That's from certain food. I can make better decisions. So I just love that. And that's not even the psychological stuff we haven't even gotten to yet, but that's just like modifying some physiological markers to just feel better, generally speaking. And I'll stop there because I'm long-winded, and I can talk about some of the psychological shifts. Okay.
I would say go for it. I want to know kind of how they connect, but you know, w when did you start doing hard things to, like, for yourself, and then kind of tie that into your practice? Like, for instance, my best friend and we've done the Bataan Death March twice.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and
Okay.
it wasn't anything lofty like I'm gonna do it in 3 hours. The goal is to finish. We'd never done it. And every once in a while you might see like people who were in the military dropping out at mile 23, and the fact that two jokers off the street did it and completed it was a big deal. And we did them 15 years apart. And
Nice. Nice.
yeah, I mean, so that was kind of like a decision for me, like, hey, this seems kind of like a fun road trip, a fun challenge. Let's see if we can do it. And when did you kind of start taking on, and what was your first thing that you're like, hey, I want to try something that I don't know I can actually complete?
So I would say it was less physical, more mental, emotional, or spiritual, if you want to put it
Uh-huh.
that way. So when I was 9, I got hooked up with a great therapist.
Uh-huh.
There's a long story behind that, but I got hooked up with a great therapist, and she taught me biofeedback, meditation, guided imagery, and she's the one who encouraged the martial arts. So that was like
Okay.
launched me in that whole space, which was awesome. And I would spend hours in my basement meditating. I'd have out of body experiences, all kind of non-ordinary states, and I'd like that was like if I wasn't doing that, I was watching Enter the Dragon and
Yes.
training in karate, like, or taekwondo in that
Oh
case.
yeah.
Yeah, and working out. So like originally it was more like, how do I learn to in a challenging way manage internal states through meditation or access non-ordinary states. She gave me biofeedback equipment, so like I'm stressed, and I do certain breathing techniques and mental techniques, and I can modify my readings, the galvanic skin response, or brainwave activities, or whatever happens to be. different machines do different things. So like I was always challenging myself to do better internally first.
Okay.
Okay. And that drove me for years and years and years. Oh, what's the next challenge to really see what I'm capable of? And I would say the first, and then the martial arts, Krav Maga. My instructor, I love my instructor. I'd drive an hour and a half through two states to go see him. And he was nice enough because he's like, okay, you do your class, whatever level class I was in. Then you can stay for the next level class. And then wink, wink, knock, knock, you can stay for the next level
Yeah.
class. So I just like 3 hours of training with him because I still had an hour and a half drive to go home. And he's like really cool about it. So like even that began to be like really physically challenging. I
Hmm.
mean, cardiovascularly. And then
Yeah.
you're fighting with one guy and you're fighting with three guys for the next three
Oh yeah.
hours. So that kind of stuff. You're into the martial arts. So those kind of things became more kind of offensive mindset, physical challenge, although it's about emotional resilience, mental toughness. That occurred a lot. And I would say probably the more challenging one was Hagana. Are you familiar with Hagana?
No, what is that? I feel like I've
So,
heard it, but I'm not
okay.
familiar.
What up? This is Ethan from the Nonchalant Perfectionist podcast. Clearly, you got a great taste in podcasts because you're listening to this pretty awesome show. Just so you know, I'm also part of the Podcast Connection Network. Yeah, that's right. We got a whole network of shows dedicated to your mental health and holistic wellness, just like this show. We've got something for every mood and for every goal. So look, man, if you're looking to expand your horizons and explore some incredible content, just check us out. The link to the Podcast Connection Network is waiting for you in the description below, man. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Think of Krav Maga on steroids,
Oh,
or think of Krav Maga as they probably do it in Israel versus how they might do it in the
yeah.
States. Okay, because Americans were afraid of being sued, So we have to stage things and calm things down over time
Yeah.
before you can get into the real hardcore stuff. Understandable. That's just our society. Okay,
Yeah.
so I was training in Hapkido and I was training in Krav Maga. And I found out there's a school called Haganah, like literally half an hour from where I live. And like, cool, I'm training in two martial arts, might as well train in three. I'll check it out. And I walked into the studio and I was like, got introduced to the instructor and I was like, what's this Haganah thing? Boom, punches me right here. Okay, first of all, I suck because I didn't block it. Fuck. But like, there's that nerve plex there. Like, you're just like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
for like 90 seconds, I'm like, holy fuck, holy fuck, holy fuck. Okay, I got to regain my like composure.
Yeah.
And my first thought was like, fuck, I want to learn that.
Yeah.
My second thought was like, he's a dumbass. I didn't sign any kind of release form. I could sue him, but I would never do that.
No,
Like,
because that's not our mindset, you know?
no.
It's like the first time I remember like staff fighting
Okay.
and you pick up the staff and the first thing the guy did was just bust my knuckles and I dropped
Yeah.
my staff and then you're ineffective. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now we're at a
Yeah.
different level real quick.
100%. 100%. So you get the mindset of both that kind of approach to training in the martial arts and being trained as a student in the martial arts. So like when I trained with them, I signed up for it immediately. I'm like, oh, I'm doing this. This is awesome. Within a couple of weeks, we're already doing like I was fighting three guys using the techniques I was learning. It wasn't like, hey, it takes a year and you can finally start sparring with some
Right.
equipment. It's like it's pretty hardcore intense. So like through the martial arts, there's been a lot of opportunities for me to kind of keep proving myself, what I'm capable of, what are my strengths. So shit, there's a weakness. I got to work on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd say that like the biggest test after that was SEALFIT, the 3 week Self Academy pre-budget training program, cultural camp, no sleep, 50 hours of,
Yeah.
grinder PT, ocean, the mountains,
Surf torture.
the surf torture, yeah, beach evolutions, a lot
What
of
was the
stuff like
what
that.
was the hardest part of Seal Fit?
Okay, so
What
I would say,
most
yeah.
challenging? How about that? I want to say
So
hardest.
you're gonna love this because this is a taco story.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, before I tell you the taco story, I'll answer that in two different parts. The second part will be the taco story. Dan Cirillo, may he rest in peace. So I trained for 9 months under Dan's supervision for the 3 weeks off academy Coco camp. My Krav Maga instructor, former Army Special Forces, I'd also train with him. Great stories. Like I'd go to his house 2 or 3 times a week, train for 3 or 4 or 5 hours. I would lay on this floor dying because exhaustion, and he'd make me steak because I'd pick up steak on the way. It was great 9 months. Okay, so in probably about 7 months in, I got a high ankle sprain training.
Mm.
And I was literally in a boot for like 6 weeks, which just fucked my training up. But
Oh
okay,
yeah.
it is what it is. So Thursday night, finishing up the 3 weeks off academy, we had a competition. It was me and another guy against two other teams. And we won. But me and like these guys were like, I was 39, I was almost 40. These guys are 21, 22,
Oh
23.
yeah.
Amazing young athletes. Two of them are already military. They're getting their contract to go buds and stuff like that. So it's just awesome. Cool. I re-injured the ankle. And I'm like, fuck, it hurts, but I'm not going to not do Kokoro camp.
Yeah.
Like I've gone this far. There's no way I'm going to quit on my team. There's no way I'm going to quit on myself. So I literally just wrapped up my ankle. And that caused a whole host of problems because you're supposed to take your shoes off and change your socks. And we can get into that in a second. But so like
Oh yeah.
there's some physical challenges during Kokoro camp. Cool. All right. So here's the Dan Cirillo story. So, and you'll definitely appreciate this having heard Dan on. You said Sean Ryan, I think,
Mm-hmm.
or Andy Stump's show. So I thought, okay, he trained me up. He's gonna like me. He's gonna treat me a little bit better, at Kokoro camp. Like, oh, this is gonna be so cool. Fucking reverse. He's like, his expectations of me were even higher than everyone else,
Yeah.
and he's gonna bust my balls even more than anyone else. And I didn't realize that. I'm like, oh, he's gonna like me. Yeah. All right. So it might have been like 30 hours in, no sleep. And he comes up to me, he's like, Ostrolenk. Yes, Coach Rillo. I heard you fell asleep. Now you're not allowed to sleep at all. If you fall asleep, you and your Boku get punished. And I thought to myself, well, I didn't fall asleep. I'm like, but if I tell him I didn't fall asleep, then I'm going to call him a liar.
Yeah.
But I did say I fell asleep, even though I didn't. I'm going to get my Boku in trouble. I'm like, fuck, there's no win here. Shit. So so I'm like, I just shut up. So I knew punishment's coming. And he's like, all right. So he called a halt to all the training. He lined up all my fellow students and all the SIL cadre, and he made me apologize to each and every one for falling asleep. And I'm like, this is fucking embarrassing because I didn't fucking fall asleep. I look like an idiot. I look like, I'm a fucking ball sacker. But okay, apologize.
You're like the old man. The old man fell asleep.
Oh, fuck. Yeah. Like, this sucks, dude.
Even though 39 is not even old.
That's true. But I'm like, okay. So I go through and I apologize to everyone. It's embarrassing, but I'm like, okay, lesson learned. I don't know what the fucking lesson is because I didn't do anything. But the lesson is like life throws at you some things that you can't figure out. You just got to go with it, right?
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I'm done, but I'm not done. So he's like, get down on the ground and start doing the leg lifts. Okay. So the guys I did the 3 weeks off academy with all came next to me because that's what Bookers do. And we started doing leg lifts together. He's like, no, Ostrolenk, only Ostrolenk. So everyone got to watch. Everyone got like a 20-minute break, which they loved, I'm sure.
Of
And
course.
they're just watching me 20 minutes of leg lifts, which is exhausting after like 30 plus hours of already training. But
Oh yeah.
okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I keep doing it. And he finally stops me. Thank God. Okay. I'm like, I learned my lesson. I learned my lesson. So we go to the beach and we're doing a beach evolution. Australian, come here. He said, put on that weight vest. So I put on a 40-pound weight vest. He goes, go in the ocean neck deep and think about what you did wrong. I'm like, fuck. So go in the ocean. And you got to think, like, if you're wearing a 40-pound weight vest in the ocean, like if you get pushed forward, you'll fall in and you'll drown. You get pushed backwards, you'll fall in and drown.
Yeah.
So I'm just doing calf raises, trying to kind of do it the whole water thing so I don't get pushed forward or backwards. And literally for like 25, 30 minutes, I'm just doing that. And like the lesson, what's my lesson? Life is hard and you just got to do what you got to do. That's a lesson because it's not like I fucked up.
Right.
Like that's literally the lesson. Like, hey, life fucking sucks sometimes and there's no options. You just do what you need to do. I mean, I could have quit, but there's no way I was going to fucking quit. And he eventually calls me back in. Hey, great job. And I got to say, I need to find this because he wrote me the nicest note where he says, I've never done this before. And he just acknowledged to me the character that he saw in me, which meant like the world to me from him, especially since he's passed away, like still have something from him. And that was just really beautiful.
I got
but
some
that was like,
goosebumps.
oh man. Yeah, man. So yeah, that was some lessons.
I lately
Kokoro camp.
when I've been kind of going through it, I don't even know. Like my dad he went in for knee surgery and ended up in the ICU, which I knew was a huge red flag, having worked in healthcare for 12 years. And, it was the first time, and this has probably been, beginning of August, maybe, I think.
Oh, wow.
For the first time, my mindset has gone to, okay, what is this teaching me? What am I supposed to be learning? Because I had a shit sandwich of a week last week, and Monday I was doing 5 miles, and I remember the exact point of what is this teaching me? What is the lesson here? And I think on the first one was, um, I heard this on a podcast, maybe somewhere, or I a version of it, and my version is you're going to have a last conversation and a last interaction with everyone in your life. So you better make them count. And because my dad was intubated in the ICU and we'd gone on vacation, and I can remember telling him, like, it's a knee surgery. It should be routine. You should be fine. It's so advanced now that typically some people are going home the same day, or they just hold you in obs overnight and you go home the next day. And, feeling like, I'm trying to comfort my 70-year-old father to tell him, don't worry about it. And he had a bad feeling about it. And I'm like, things are going to be fine. And, to think like, oh, is that your last conversation? And then with the shit sandwich I had last week and figuring that out Monday, because Sunday was just horrific. It was kind of like the culmination of an entire week was, you know, the space I'm in, the things that I do, podcasting, wanting to help people, being a parent, you know, trying to teach a 10-year-old all the stuff that, you can learn stuff in school, but, you know, character traits, not being a follower, being unique. And I'm like, and being a podcaster, not everybody, people are going to hate and throw shade all the time. And as long as I'm in this space, and you're going to have to learn to ignore it. And this is not the first hard time. And I made a post, after I hit the 5 miles, and I felt it. And I remember, like, I used to be this very angry person, especially when I drank and break shit. I've broken 3 windshields out of cars and just horrible. And I was like, I feel this person coming back up. I need to
Mm.
suppress it. And there was this moment. I'm walking down this hill and I go, why are you trying to suppress it? Like, fuck that. You need to choose who you want to be. What are you about? You feel like shit because you're out of alignment,
Mm.
spiritually, physically, all kinds of stuff. You know what you're about. You're kind, caring, compassionate, understanding. You lead with love and grace, forgiving. That's what makes you feel good. That's what you want to put out into the world. This is, I go, I don't want to carry this vibe. I don't want to
Mm.
look standoffish. It's not the vibe I want to put out into the world. And I was like, it has to be a choice. And I can tell you, I made that post. I felt good about it. And um it's like as you're making it, my wife calls like, "Oh, my vehicle won't start, so now you got to deal with that." I'm like, "Great." But I'm like, "Fuck it. I'm gonna go crush it." And I did. And when I
Nice.
changed that, as soon as I changed like choice and I'm choosing to be the person I want to be aligned because alignment feels good. It feels truthful, it feels invigorating. And then every interaction I had with a person after that was just magic and things
Wow.
fell into place. But, you know, it kind of goes back to, what we're talking about here is this mindset in this choice to push through. And I don't, do you choose resilient? Is resilience something that's built, something that you have, or is resilience kind of a choice to bounce back? A choice to have a quality of resilience, I guess you could say. How do you
Uh,
define resilience in
yeah,
that
there's
matter?
some excellent questions. But if you don't mind, first of all, could you send me that
Yeah.
article? I'd love to read it.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Um, just curiosity, how's your dad? Like you said, he had a premonition, but like, what happened?
He, you know, we I'm gonna get the medical records. I'm kind of
Yep.
letting things you ever have an employee that thinks they got away with something
Mm,
and you wait a couple of weeks and
okay.
then you address it?
Okay.
Um, yeah, I'm gonna
But
get the
he
medical.
survived the surgery?
Oh yeah, he's
Okay.
doing
Okay.
well
All right.
now,
All right. Okay.
but
Good.
yeah, it took a while. Um, and it's been a little bit of a road, but having spent 12 years in healthcare, being well versed in auditing charts of nurses and physicians and all that stuff, I'm gonna piece together the truth,
Okay.
guaranteed. And
Got it.
um, yeah,
Okay.
because what's right is right, and
Right on.
yeah, he's doing well, and thankfully, with my experience, I think comes that advocation
Mhm.
of, you know, I'm going to make sure that we figure out because to me, he survived and he's lucky, but whatever mistake was made by whoever made it, they it's about the future of others that are going to pass through that system.
Right on. Right on. Right on. Okay. Well, I'm glad I wasn't sure if he survived the
Oh
surgery,
yeah,
so I'm
yeah, yeah,
glad he
yeah, yeah.
survived. Okay. That's good.
He's doing well.
Good. All right. So to resilience. So JC Glick and I mentioned he's a former Army Ranger. We run this men's group called Resilience Optimized.
Oh,
And this answers your question. Resilienceoptimized.com. Cohort number 2 starts in January. We're finishing up
okay.
cohort number 1 next week. Um, and this answers your question because we talk about resilience 1.0, and we're talking about now resilience 2.0. It's like upgraded version of resilience. And resilience 1.0 for a lot of people is like Jocko Willink, get up at 4:30 in the
Hmm.
morning, lift heavy weights, or David Goggins, run 100 miles before breakfast. Really physically challenge yourself to do really hard things. All that's awesome, really important. Like you as a man need to be physically capable so you can
Right.
be healthy and productive. Maybe some tactical training so you can make sure you can protect your family. Like if
You
there's
don't
a
want to
fire
be
in
a
your house,
victim. It's a crazy
you don't
ass
want to be a
world out
victim.
there.
Yeah, yeah, the VUCA environment for sure. Like if there's a fire in your house, can you carry your kid out the window and down a
Yeah.
chain ladder, or over whatever? Like you need to be physically capable just in case there's emergencies in the home, let alone just to be for longevity purposes. Cool. All that's really important. But for us, resilience 2.0 is that plus we break it into 3 different sections, and this speaks to a lot of the stuff we talked about. One of them is like men's, and this is not just men, women too, but men, because that's what we work with,
Hmm.
seem to have a hard time feeling, thinking, and sensing certain parts of themselves. And they seek distractions because they don't like what's going on inside themselves. Porn, drugs, alcohol,
Guilty.
work, working
Avoidance.
out. They like to avoid whatever's happening. So for us, resilience is the ability to sit longer in your own shit.
Oh, sucks.
Don't
Sunday, I
repress it.
did it for 15 hours and it was fucking horrible.
Okay. So that's a wow, that's a long time. Okay. Yeah. Which is great because because what happens if we don't allow this stuff to come in through our system? It comes out sideways. Passive aggressive behavior, psychiatric or psychological problems, physical problems. A lot of like chronic illnesses can be connected to some degree or level of repression of emotions, those kind of things. So like it's important to allow things to emerge and be with them, not try to repress them. That doesn't mean you need to express them.
Right.
Like for us, it's like, yeah, feel it, manage it, and then as appropriate, express it depending on the relationship and the ends that you seek in the relationship. So like for us, that's capacities to cultivate over time because we are not taught in our culture to sit. We are taught in our culture to jump on, our phone and our computers and get distracted by all these things. That's one. And I'll stop there because there's the relationship piece and the community piece. Any questions on the just sitting with your own stuff
I
piece?
think you know what it reminds me of? It kind of ties back to that Eastern philosophy. We love the martial arts and you see the Buddhist monks and stuff and meditating. So it seems I think it makes 100% um it seems definitely correct and it makes sense to do that. But even though I have that background and I know it, I do not know why I was so resistant and what took me so long. I avoided for a long time. I've had periods where, I was in the military in the 90s, drinking culture. I had my 19th birthday in Japan. There was no drinking age.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really, we just went hard. I worked in kitchens. We went hard. we worked hard, we played hard. The emergency room, a level one trauma center, it was nothing to get off at 7 in the morning and go to a place and start drinking and stay there till noon or 1 p.m. and then be back at 6:30 p.m. back for another
Wow.
12-hour shift at night. And so some of those habits carried forward. I had some periods where I didn't drink. I don't know that I was an alcoholic. I never had trouble stopping drinking, but the problem is kind of once I drank, like I wanted to do it daily.
Hmm.
It kind of became like a habit. And so, for me, it's been, you know, it's been over a year. That was kind of one of the steps a couple years ago, like when I was in a
Good for
really
you.
bad spot and I was like, okay, this is the stop. Like I need baseline, no alcohol, no antidepressants, like all this stuff, expel, start walking, start exercising, start journaling, start improving, and trust the process
Nice,
and
nice, nice.
start sitting in it. And I think it was, I had heard this podcast and it was somebody out of Austin. And being kind of the person that I am, it was this analogy of he said, what's happening is let's say you have a baseline like your RPMs, you drink the alcohol at red lines, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's that little window that I feel good. And then you have the equal and opposite reaction. And then the next couple of days you're trying to come back up to baseline. Well, when
Yep.
you're about here before you can wait 2 days, you're back. Hey, I want to get back above baseline. So you drink
Right on.
again. And that was the first time it just made sense. And I was like, baseline. I want baseline RPMs, period. And I want to stay there so I know what's what. And that kind of became you have to sit through it. And I've been getting better at it.
Good,
And I
good.
can tell you, the part that I want to improve the most is to continue to shorten the distance of that window of pivoting into out of that negative state into positivity. And especially with a lot of the podcasts I listen to, and when they talk about tier one operators and selection, and they talk about the mindset as it relates to that, it seems that some of the qualities that they have is that ability to pivot quickly to if it wasn't right and you made a mistake, pivot quickly, leave it behind, don't stew in it, don't sit in it, but move forward quickly. And that really resonates with me. So currently, like when I said sitting in it for 15 hours, it's like, I was triggered multiple times last week, multiple people, multiple things, having like the best week at once and the worst week all at once.
Mm.
But being insightful enough to go, okay, 15 hours is too much. Where can I improve that? Where can I pivot? So almost in that way of going, um, I'm 48. I'm not going to be a tier one operator, but a tier one operator to myself and my
Hmm. Hmm.
mindset
Hmm.
and that quality of, um, hey, this didn't go exactly the way I wanted, or I stepped out of alignment of my character. You know, maybe I gave somebody the bird or, was standoffish with them because they pissed me off. To really let that exit me and just move on, move on.
So I love that because in my work with individual clients, I talk a lot about flexibility, both
Hmm.
mentally, emotionally, but also in the physical system, like physically. Because like there's the rigidity, like we show up the way we show up. This is who I am. This is how I have to be. Whatever that is for you. It's not just a mindset. It physically shows up in the breath and the posture and all that stuff. It's like you unwind all that stuff. You're loosening the whole system because you want your mind and your whole physical system to be adaptive to this situation you find yourself in, so you can pivot as you need to and not get locked into I have to do it this way because this is the way I've always done it. So I love that conversation with you. I think it's really important. And a piece of that, it goes back to like you just shared, you're not drinking, you're working out, all the stuff you do. It's so important to dial in the physiology because your baseline will improve. Like, hey, I'm here now. Cool. I'm eating better. I'm sleeping better. I'm dealing with my stress. I'm living with the 24-hour day night like cycles. all the stuff that we would be interested in, and it goes up here. My new baseline, my new baseline, my new baseline.
Yeah.
So you're so much more capable of dealing physically with all that stuff that comes at you. And that's reflected also in your psychology, the flexibility you want in the mind. So all this stuff goes together really, really nicely. So I love this conversation because
What
it
it taught
articulates
me,
that.
what it taught me Monday was, you know, I think that was kind of my level up to a new baseline.
Nice,
Um,
nice.
but what I always say is, every time you level up, then the real work begins. Everybody has this illusion of like, oh, when I get here, it's gonna be the shit. But if you listen to any of the podcasts that we listen to, you understand like making it through buds is just now you still got SQT, then you still got to be the new guy at the team and endure that. And then you still got to go through training cycles and prove yourself there. And then, prove yourself a worthy teammate, a worthy individual, because, those kinds of environments, just like the ER, it's based on, um, can you can you conduct yourself in a way that you're a value add to the team? Because the moment you're a detriment to the team, you're off the team. And, in the ER, that may look like you're going to be sitting in the observation unit, babysitting, psych patients or snotty noses. You're not going to be working with, the level one trauma surgeons that are top notch and saving the lives and maybe doing the work that you desired, whatever, got you in that in the first place. But, there's different levels to everything. I seek those kinds of things, and I've had the jobs I've said I've had because that's kind of my personality, and I seek that, wanting to be at the top or the best. You know, I I don't care if we're playing tic-tac-toe. Yes, I aim to win. And there's this huge difference is I play to win, I don't play not to lose. And some people, they don't get that. There's a
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah. That's
So,
cool. Yeah, because in my work, I love like the way you're talking about the lead or the tier one approach to life. Not that you can be a tier one operator, but just the mindset and approach.
mhm,
Because I talk about going from the 10% to the 1%. You dial in all these four pillars, even if you're like highly successful and you're part of the 10%, hey, there's so much more that you can improve upon. You dial in these four pillars that I started talking about, and you can go from the 10% to the 1%. And a lot of that could be really subtle shifts. It's not like major huge things because you're already doing pretty well in areas of your life. But I would imagine for a lot of these guys and gals, hey, they're really successful here, but in order to be really successful here, they fucked up over here. Like their
yeah,
marriages aren't great, their kids don't like them, their health sucks, or whatever the
yeah.
combination of things are. Hey, you want to be a tier one operator in life, not in combat, but or the
Yeah.
1%. You got to take what got you successful here and apply it in all the areas of your life, and then
When,
some.
when especially I think, one of the biggest things is I've interviewed other people on men's groups and whatnot, people who lead them. And, I'm at a phase where I've kind of got my podcast on a regime. I got that piece figured out. Not perfect. There's still improvements to be made. But, my thing was like, hey, I'm going to develop myself, sell myself so people know who I am and what they get. And whenever the time comes, the universe tells me what I should be offering as a service or selling,
Nice,
then I will
nice.
do that. And because I always say flexibility, you got to bend so you don't break, like a palm tree.
Yeah.
And, and so I have a business coach, and it's like, men, the troubles I've had and the development I've done over the past couple years, this is what I want to focus on. My podcast is the Men of the House podcast. And
Nice.
so, understanding that, hey, this is now the direction you want to go. But, I definitely try to keep an open mind and say, because I used to be very, very rigid, as a young man. But you're seeing, as we talk about more men and, we've talked about women, how over the past 30, 40 years, they've gone from housewives to CEOs, and they've developed. And meanwhile, we've been kind of doing the same bullshit, like go to work, come home, drink, hang out with your friends, whatever it is you do. Football's important, blah, blah, blah. Avoiding, never really um, working on ourselves. And especially, I love Andy Stumpf when he's always like, hey, like maybe you're a great operator, but everything else in your life is a damn dumpster fire. That doesn't make for the complete package,
Yeah.
when you talk about that kind of stuff. And so, you know, as men, we have to understand that it's not anymore. Like more is expected of us now. This is 2024. And not only that is what do we want kind of the male species to be like 20 years from now? I mean, I have a 10-year-old, I have a 22-year-old, a 20, and a 10-year-old, all daughters. What kind
Wow.
of people do I want them to marry? If
Yeah,
you'd
yeah,
asked me a couple years ago, even,
yeah.
and this is kind of hard to admit, would you want your daughter to marry somebody like you? 2 years ago, I'd have said, no fucking way.
Mm.
Now I'm a little bit closer. Yeah, yeah.
Nice, nice, nice.
So I think that's important. But I think as we, speaking of men, it's not good enough anymore just to be good at your job or
Hmm.
whatever it is, or bringing home the bacon, whatever you want to call it. Like there's an emotional component of um, showing up to your wife, being
100%.
open and vulnerable with your wife,
Yeah,
being the father your children need, and not
yeah.
just being a slave to, well, I worked all day. Like, what more do you want from me? Well, I want everything. Like, I was doing homework with my daughter last night at 9 o'clock. Whatever it takes. It was like, hey, we did homework. I'm the one that got her ready for her shower, did the homework. We read for the last 30 minutes of the night together. We had two copies of the book, one from the library, her own personal copy. I read 2 pages, she read 2 pages.
That's great,
And
man.
so, that's what's required, I think, to be the level of men that we need in the world. And
100%.
And so, but what are the top three mistakes that people make when they try to overcome adversity and you're trying to make some of these changes for yourself and evolve into a better person?
Yeah. Do you mind if I speak to the relationship
Yeah,
piece
go
for a
for it.
moment? Because
Absolutely.
you named a lot of really important things that kind of want to highlight
Yeah.
as well. So, like, I was talking about there's three areas of resilience 2.0. One is
Hmm.
like, hey, you need to be aware of what's going on inside of yourself, fully manage it, and learn to express it in healthy, productive ways. Cool. Okay. Interpersonally, and let's just stick with a heterosexual couple,
Hmm.
man, woman. So, like, men seem to have a tendency to want to fix their messy wife. Oh, she's messy. I'll solve her problem. And the question is like, are you solving her problem because you feel uncomfortable, her being messy, or are you solving her problem because you actually want to help solve a problem? It's usually a combination of both.
Yeah.
I do care for her, and I want her to feel better, and it's really uncomfortable for me when she's like that, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Cool. So, like, when I work with these men, I'm like, okay, what I want you to learn how to do, and this is, you have to learn how to do this because we're not taught this in our family of origin, is how can you be with your wife in such a way that she actually needs you in that very moment? How
Mm.
can you show up for her as she needs you to be? And there's a lot of pieces of that because it's not saying deny what's ever going on inside of yourself, but it requires an intimate type of communication all the time. For you to assume you know exactly what she needs and try to fix her, no. Maybe she wants you to help her solve her problem. Cool. Maybe she just wants to express whatever's going on for her inside of her system, and she just wants you to listen. But it requires you to actually ask her, "Hey, honey," or whatever you call her, like, "Hey,
Hmm.
what would you like from me right now? How can I best serve you? How can I best be with you? How can I best support you?" And those questions need to be asked all or repeatedly, because it's not like, oh, now I know it.
Yeah.
Because 5 minutes from now or 5 days from now,
It
completely different
changes.
question.
I've
Yeah,
been with
yeah,
her for 18 years and yeah, it changes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
If
it's like,
anybody
yeah.
says, hey, babe, and I turn around, it's probably likely because that's what she calls me.
Oh, nice, nice.
Oh,
Yeah, so you learn how to be with your partner in the way that she needs you, and it's reciprocal. I mean, it
yeah.
needs to be a conversation both ways, and it goes to your point about men need to be vulnerable. Like,
Hmm.
as much as it's important for women to feel safe sharing whatever she's feeling with you, she also needs to commit to creating a safe environment for when you share with her whatever's going on for her. It's like, hey, we're not going to use this against each other, 5 days
Yeah.
from now when we have a conflict. Like, no, like we are safe spaces for each other. We're going to support each other. And, we talk about tier one operators. A friend of mine's former dev guru, he says this to me all the time. He's like, two is one, two is one, two is one. And when I work with my couples, I was like, hey, you guys got to really, as a mindset, ingrain in your mindset and in your body, literally, that it's you two against the world. It's not you against him or her against
Two
you.
is one and one is none.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a mindset that needs to be ingrained in the physical body. So I actually have practices that I have couples do to learn not only to regulate themselves, heal their own wounds, regulate themselves, and evolve, but like, how do you co-regulate together? So you can actually take on the world as two as one. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. Like, I work with couples, and the first couple sessions, they're like, kind of,
Yeah. Yeah.
and by the end of the 6 months period of time, it's more like they're close, they're connected. You can literally energetically see them. Physically, they're connected. They're smiling even during tough stuff, and they're dealing with it together as a couple, as opposed to two injured little kids, the parts coming up and
I got an interesting kind of story on that, and it relates to the podcast in that, you know, I have a master's, managed a couple clinics, got laid off 9 months because they shrunk management and all this stuff. And I tried for years. I put in applications and I got some offers, and I didn't want to move. I didn't want to take a pay cut. Um, all kinds of reasons. And, regardless, I was like, okay, when I decided to fix myself and stop drinking all this shit, I was like, start a podcast. What makes me an expert? Because I listen to them. But anyway, the point was, is I was like, my wife, she didn't really understand it. And it was about this job and how are you going to make money? And I was just doing Uber Eats and kind of these side things and very resistant because it was this kind of whole, what we talk about, these traditional roles and whatnot. And there was some point, like when I broke it down to her and said, like, let's look at our situation. And the way everything is okay, I don't make the money I used to, but with kind of how everything is arranged, we're okay. We have everything we need. We're not wanting for anything. That job and the amount of money I make hasn't prevented us from doing anything we've wanted to do the past several years. And, once I started kind of explaining, and I don't know how, what, why, maybe she just loves me that much, which I'm thankful for and supports me. But there was some point, and I had this kind of thing of going like, I had so much trouble with the podcast because it was like we were, I'm going one way, she's going the opposite. And I was like, man, if she would just support me and both sets of energy are pushing towards the same direction, then it's going to make a whole hell of a difference in the podcast. And there was some point that I don't know if, because I would have these discussions with my father, and she spends a lot of time with him because she actually gets paid through the VA to care for him, take him to
yeah,
appointments. And
yeah.
that's how we both work through that, through home health. And once she kind of got on board, understood who I am, what I'm trying to accomplish, what I'm about, and she saw that the freedom that it allowed, like for me to be, I guess, a more engaged father and spouse and all these different things. And I still have a lot of work to do. I'm not claiming to be perfect. I'm just better than I was 2 years ago for sure. But
Excellent.
once that happened and the energies were traveling in the same direction, um, myself, the podcast, everything just has been propelling forward, and
Man,
it
that's
has made a
beautiful.
huge
Yeah,
difference.
yeah,
And
yeah.
when you said that two is one, you two versus the world, um, I totally felt that with the podcast. It makes a huge difference, and part of that is that communication and vulnerability. And I can tell you, even though we've been together for 18 years, through different times and what, it's like a snake. And, you know, I even put in that post Monday, it's like I've even gotten better at being honest and open and vulnerable with my wife to say, hey, I'm struggling, like I was Sunday. Does it always come out perfect? in the right way? No, and I understand that, but understanding where I make my errors or where I can get better is a start. And, all that matters is I'm working towards it and I want to get better at it. And I'm the kind of person, I got my master's, I've done all these things. I know I can do it. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really worried about it. But yeah, it was kind of that way.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story, and it's like you're a great case study of what's possible if you're willing to be honest, be vulnerable, share. Both people have to obviously play in the same space.
Yeah.
Really, really important, and to come up with new agreements on how you want to operate together. So that's, man, good for you. Especially as you pointed out, like in the last 2 years, it's been a major shift for you
Oh yeah.
between the weight loss and getting rid of a lot of your medications,
I think if you
improvement
can
of
go
your
from the brink of
relationship.
divorce to thriving more than we ever have, I guess, at a different level.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Cool. That's good.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm super grateful, super thankful. But that's why I married her because, um, for me, out of all the qualities, I was like, I knew she'd be a great mom and a great wife, no matter what. And I knew that if for some reason we never worked out because my parents divorced when I was 19 or 20, and
Mm.
um, I knew that she would never be kind of vindictive or whatever because she was married once before, and you know, we've been together since the other kids were 2 and 3, and I'm very tight with her ex-husband.
Wow,
Um,
that's cool.
oh
Okay.
yeah, and we've known this, because I said, hey, I'm never trying to replace this, whatever. It takes a tribe. I can remember breaking down New Year's Eve one year, our transmission went out and we were stuck on the side of the road, me, my wife, all the kids, and we were near his work. He worked at FedEx. He was the first one to show up. He sent them in his car and he stayed on the highway with me, waited for the tow truck, rode together. I've stayed with him. We go to breakfast the time all
Oh my
together.
God, that's
We've
great,
gone on
man.
family vacations. And I can tell you, 18 years ago, people thought we were crazy. They were like, you're friends with your wife's ex-husband and all this kind of stuff, and y'all do this, and you stay at his house, and y'all hang out and blah blah blah. And but his parents, he treats my daughter like he does his own. So, and you know, it I look at it now and I go, it wasn't that crazy. Maybe I was kind of ahead and emotionally ahead of my time in having that viewpoint. Our birthdays are a day apart.
Okay.
It's just so interesting, but you can have it, the kids shouldn't suffer because two adults don't get along. And it took me a long time. My parents got divorced and I was upset and all that. But after having a lot of my own relationships, it's like, hey, sometimes two people just can't get along, but, or they're just not meant for each other. But that doesn't mean all the other stuff around it that they share should suffer,
Right, 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 right.
you know?
Man, so I love that. Talking about flexibility and
Yeah.
adaptability and learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that. And they wonder why maybe I have the viewpoints I have, but, I think it is possible, so. But yeah, top three mistakes people make when trying to overcome adversity.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the last one first because it kind of goes back to some of the things we're
Hmm.
talking about. Um, yes, we're sovereign individuals, but we have a team. You have your wife, maybe you have a buddy,
Hmm.
maybe you have your father. It sounds like you and your father are really close.
We
Awesome.
are.
So like you don't have to do this alone. Rely on your teammates, however you define your teammates. And it's really important if you don't have people in your life that you can rely on, create those relationships. And the first question to ask is like, how am I showing up in such a way that I don't attract someone who could show up for me that way too?
I say go
Because
out and be the person that you would want to meet. That's my
perfectly,
saying.
exactly. You just said it differently, but exactly that's how I'd say
Hmm.
it. So like, hey, if you don't have a team, create a team and be the best teammate you can be.
Yeah.
So like the 3 a.m. friend, if you want to put it that way too. All right. So that's one. Second thing is the physiological stuff. It's really important as best as you can to keep those things dialed in. Because usually under stress, we drop our physical training, we don't eat so well, we stop sleeping well. And that's all cycling to make our ability to recover from whatever it is psychologically that much more challenging. So like,
My calories suffer when I go into a slump. I don't eat.
yeah, some people eat too much, some people don't eat enough. Exactly. Yeah. And we mess with our sleep, we don't move as much, we don't physically train, we, all those things, too much alcohol or drugs or whatever we do, right?
Yeah.
So like, you know, keep your physiology dialed in. And then another mistake I think we can make is not looking at the situation as an opportunity to learn about ourselves and the people or the situation at hand so we can use it for growth. And it's really hard to do it during. If you can do it during, awesome. If you can do it after, reflecting back, that's great too. It's an opportunity to look at my strengths. Man, I did pretty good here, here, and here, and here. Good for me. That's awesome. You
Yeah.
want to celebrate even the littlest wins. Awesome. And then like, oh, I didn't do so great here and here and here. All right, I don't need to beat myself up. Maybe sometimes I do beat myself up. That's something to bring to your therapist or your coach.
Yeah.
But like, here's 3 areas that I could improve upon. Awesome. Now I have my baseline in those areas, and I know what I need to work on to improve. Maybe there's improve my thinking. Maybe there's certain character traits I need to cultivate. Maybe I need a little bit more of a risk taker, or I need to be more brave or loving or courageous or whatever it is. And then clearly define those things in terms of behaviors, and then create opportunities to train those behaviors become traits. Like, so all 3 things: find your tribe, keep your physiology dialed in, and use these opportunities for lessons to learn, both to celebrate your strengths and also where you need to cultivate your weaknesses to higher levels of functioning.
What has been one of the things I like to ask, kind of before we hop off
Yeah.
what is one, um, one of the most fulfilling things that's happened to you that you never would have imagined as that young man deciding to go from an MBA to whatever?
That's a
And you
great
took that
question.
chance and you're like, and something that you're like, man, had I never made that chance, trusted myself, pursued my passion, this magical thing, never in a million years that I think would happen.
So I'd say 2 things. One is I've heard some people I've worked with over the past 30 years, I've heard from them. And some are suicidal and decided through the work that they did not to kill themselves, and
Hmm.
they created amazing lives. And like that just touches me really deeply, that I could have an effect on someone to recognize that their life is important, and then they could go on and proceed. And they did the work. I was just there as a listener or supporter, cheerleader of sorts.
Yeah.
And then they can go on and do some amazing things. So like that in itself was really heartwarming for me. I had a client who survived 9/11 using the trade centers, and he thanked me for helping him begin to work through his trauma. And now he's literally, I heard from him about a month ago, and he worked with a trauma expert since our work together. It cleared a lot of the trauma, and he's just thriving. So it's like, wow, even if I'm a small catalyst for the slight changes he needed or someone needs, that leads him
Right.
on a new path of growth and health and stuff. That's love. That's awesome. And then outside of, positively impacting other people, I say, completing Kokoro camp and the
Yeah.
50-mile go ruck under time was like, that was effing awesome.
Yeah.
Like, as in terms of like doing something that's really effing cool. Yeah, yeah. Those 2 things stand out.
Yeah. Because it's like you prove to yourself that, yeah, well, and back in 2016 when I did the Bataan Death March,
Mm.
the only way is through. You're only as sick as a secret. I drank half of it, the Jameson, the night before,
Holy
doing
shit, dude.
26.2 miles and completed it.
Wow. Okay.
I wasn't the fastest. This was like 7 hours, 8 hours,
uh,
but 26.2 miles after drinking half a fifth of Jameson is,
Jesus Christ.
it's dumb.
Wow.
I don't recommend it, but
No.
that's the kind of grit I have. And, sometimes I remind myself that, yeah, you're sometimes can be dumb. If you're gonna be dumb, you better be tough. I know I have a lot of grit. Sometimes it doesn't always surface when you need it mentally. The physical pain is like, oh man, I can make it through anything, whatever, whatever, whatever. But man, I tell you, and Andy Stump says it all the time, is like you take your car to a mechanic. Um, what's the difference of getting your this checked out? on a
100%.
regular
Coach,
basis, like
therapist.
a
Yeah.
check engine light, before it
Yeah.
comes on and before
Yeah.
it's a problem. So yeah, yeah, it's been interesting, but yeah. I'm gonna go get some movement in, and I got all kinds of I gotta go to my daughter's school. We got school events today, but I will definitely be in touch with you again,
Please.
because I have a bunch of ideas as I'm rebranding and finding my place in the space. And I've been running into incredible resources thanks to Podmatch and people like yourself showing up and just being so gracious with your information and your time. And I really appreciate it. And thank you for coming on today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I look forward to future conversations for sure.
Yes. Awesome,
Yeah.
man. Well,
Cool.
you have a good rest of your day, and
Thank you.
I gotta go get some movement in. I gotta practice what I preach, if you know what I
There you
mean.
go. I hear you. Good luck, man. Enjoy your
All
time
right.
with your daughter too.
You
All
too.
right. Ciao.
Bye. Well, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. Remember, go out and be the person that you want to meet.
Let's go.
Asteroid of